Welcome to the Friday Night Campfire Stories. My name is Rob and I will be your host for this evening. For those of you that are new here, I'm a short story writer, and every single Friday we experience one chapter from one of my short stories. Last week we started my Christmas horror story, which I called Donum. This week we'll be getting into chapter 2 of Donum. Last week we saw a Christmas Eve starting with a young family, Ashley, Tom, and their little daughter Emma, who are welcoming Ashley's sister, Emily, and her new husband, Theo, into their home. The sisters haven't seen each other in quite a few years, and they live very drastic different lifestyles, which causes a little bit of headbutting throughout the night. Ashley lives a lifestyle very modest and just a normal person, middle-class family lifestyle, raising their daughter with her husband. Meanwhile, Emily, on the other hand, is very extravagant, bougie, very all about showing off her wealth and being all about her and her husband Theo. The two try to make as best of a night as they can given the current situation. Later on, they sit by the fire, and Emily suggests that they bring back an old tradition where they get to open one gift on Christmas Eve, which brings back nostalgic memories up until they pull out Theo's gift. Theo's gift is very strange because it's wrapped differently than the other ones. And as far as they remember, it wasn't there when they first walked in. This has everybody a little bit on edge. And then they look at the tag on it. It says, "To Theo from Donum Diaobli." This causes the night to kind of turn on edge, as the family now is dealing with the dread and fear that comes in the name of Donum Diaobli. That is where we left off, and today we will be getting back into the story, and we'll learn more about Donum and what this family is about to go through. So, throw some more logs on the fire, get the popcorn and hot cocoa ready. This is Chapter 2 of Donum. Donum, Chapter 2. The room was bathed in darkness, save for the dim, sickly glow of the fire struggling to stay alive in the fireplace. Shadows twisted unnaturally, like living things writhing against the walls. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the air, broken only by the shallow breathing of those inside. Ashley stood frozen in place, her heart hammering in her chest as a foul, metallic scent filled her nostrils. Blood. She tried to move, to scream, but her body wouldn't respond. Her eyes darted around the room, her gaze landing on the Christmas tree, now grotesque in the gloom, its lights flickering and casting sinister shapes on the floor. Then, she saw it. Standing at the far end of the living room, near the shattered remains of the window, was a figure, a towering, monstrous silhouette that seemed to absorb the very light around it. The demon stood hunched, its gaunt frame twisted and deformed, with long skeletal arms that ended in jagged claws. Its eyes, burning a hellish crimson, stared directly at her, boring into her soul. Its mouth, a wide, gaping maw, lined with sharp, rotting teeth, stretched into a wicked grin. Donum Diaobli. The name echoed in her mind as the creature's head tilted, watching her with amusement, like a predator playing with its prey. Its skin was charred and cracked as though it had crawled straight out of the deepest pits of hell. A smoke seemed to rise from the flesh, filling the room with acid stench of sulfur. A sudden, agonizing scream cut through the silence. Ashley's blood ran cold as she turned towards the source of the sound, Emily. Her sister was pinned against the wall, held in place by invisible hands. Her eyes bulged with terror as the demon slowly stalked towards her, its clawed fingers dragging along the floor, creating a piercing screech that set Ashley's teeth on edge. "Emily!" Ashley tried to scream, but the sound died in her throat. The demon's claws wrapped around Emily's throat, lifting her effortlessly off the ground. Emily struggled, her legs kicking wildly, but there was no escape. The creature's grin widened, and with a sudden, savage motion, it twisted hard. The sickening crack of bones snapping echoed through the room as Emily's body went limp. The demon tossed her aside like a rag doll, her lifeless form crumpling on the floor in a heap. "No!" Ashley's scream finally broke free, but it was too late. Tom rushed forward, fury and fear etched into his face. The demon was faster. It lunged with a terrifying speed, its claws slashing through the air with lethal precision. Blood sprayed across the room as Tom collapsed, clutching his throat, his body convulsing as he bled out on the floor. Ashley's breath came in ragged gasps, her mind spinning in disbelief. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't happening. She grabbed Emma, holding her daughter tightly to her chest as a tear streamed down her face. The child whimpered, her small body trembling in Ashley's arms, but the demon's gaze shifted towards them, its eyes gleaming with sadistic pleasure. "No, please," Ashley whispered, backing away, her legs weak beneath her. "Please, not her." But the demon was relentless. It moved closer, its claws reached out, inches from Emma's fragile body. Ashley screamed again, her voice hoarse, as she tried to shield her daughter from the inevitable. But just as the demon's claws grazed Emma's soft skin, the world around her shattered. The room collapsed inward, spiraling into darkness, the grotesque figure of the demon dissolving into a swirling, inky black void. Ashley jolted awake, her body drenched in cold sweat, her heart pounding so violently in her chest she thought it might burst. Her breath came in shallow, panicked gasps as she sat up in her bed, clutching the blanket tightly in her fist. The room was dark and silent, save for the low crackle of the fire. The streetlights twinkled softly in the corner, as though mocking the horror that just gripped her. It was just a dream, just a nightmare. She brought a shaking hand to her face, wiping away the tears that had fallen in her sleep. Her throat felt tight, her pulse thudding in her ear. She could still feel the weight of the demon's presence, the terror so real it clung to her, even in the waking world. Next to her, Tom stirred, his voice groggy. "Ash, you okay?" Forcing herself to take a breath. "Yeah," she whispered, her voice shaky. "I'm fine. Just a bad dream." But she wasn't fine. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling, her mind still reeling with the vivid, brutal images. Emily, Tom, even little Emma, all dead, murdered by the thing they had welcomed into their home without knowing. Ashley glanced at the window, where snow gently drifted outside, a serene contrast to the chaos that had gripped her moments before. She tried to shake off the lingering fear, but something gnawed at the edges of her thoughts, a sense that the nightmare hadn't just been a figment of her imagination. Something wasn't right. Her eyes drifted to the foot of the bed, where the strange, blackened box Theo had opened earlier sat untouched. The firelight danced across its surface, illuminating the sinister symbol etched into the wood. A chill crept down her spine. She couldn't shake the feeling that that dream had been more than just her mind playing tricks on her. Something had been unleashed tonight, something dark and ancient, and it wasn't finished with them yet. The next morning, Christmas morning, the house felt strangely still, as if the air itself had thickened overnight. Snow continued to fall outside, blanketing the world in a soft white coat. Inside, festive decorations seemed out of place, too cheerful, too bright for the growing sense of dread that lingered in the corners. As Ashley sat at the table, her fingers gripping a mug of coffee she didn't feel like drinking, the dream from the night before clung to her like a shadow, the vivid images of death and darkness too fresh in her mind. She kept glancing at Emma, who sat in her high chair eating cereal, blissfully unaware of the tension filling the room. Tom stood by the window, his arms crossed, staring at the snow. His jaw was tight, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. Theo sat across from Ashley, his face pale and drawn, eyes red from a sleepless night. Emily hovered nearby, her nervous energy evident in a way that she kept pacing back and forth, her gaze flickering to the blackened box that sat ominously in the center of the table. It hadn't moved since Theo opened it the night before, but his presence weighed heavily on all of them. Finally, Tom broke the silence. "All right," he said, turning away from the window, his voice cold and demanding. "I'm done pretending everything's normal. Theo, you need to explain what the hell is going on. What is this Donum Diaobli thing?" Theo shifted uncomfortably in his chair, avoiding their eyes. His hands fidgeted on the table as if he didn't know where to begin. Ashley leaned forward, her voice gentler but no less urgent. "Theo, please. We all heard what you said last night. The devil's gift." Theo swallowed hard, his eyes finally meeting hers. There was a haunted look in them, something deeper than mere exhaustion. Guilt, fear, maybe even shame. He sighed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think it was real," he began, his voice cracking. I thought it was just a myth, a stupid legend passed around by desperate people." "What kind of legend?" Tom pressed, his face hardening. Theo rubbed his hands over his face, looking as though he wished he could just disappear. "When I was younger, before I met Emily, I got involved with some bad people. I didn't realize how deep I was until it was too late. They were obsessed with the occult, with dark rituals, and things no sane person should ever touch." Ashley felt her skin crawl, the word striking a nerve. "Rituals?" Theo nodded, his eyes clouding with regret. "They believed they could make deals with entities, demons. They summoned these things, offered sacrifices in exchange for power, wealth, whatever they wanted." Tom scoffed. "That's insane. You're telling me you got mixed with a cult?" "I didn't believe any of it," Theo said quickly, his voice pleading for them to understand. "I thought it was all fake, some weird scam to manipulate people. But then, one night during a ritual, something happened, something I couldn't explain." Ashley's heart raced. Her mind flashed back to her nightmare. What happened? Theo's eyes darkened as he stared at the box on the table. "They summoned something. I didn't see it, not directly, but the air, it changed. You could feel it. And then, one by one, people started dying, disappearing. At first I thought they were just leaving, but no one ever heard from them again. I got out before anything happened to me, though." Emily, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke, her voice shaking. "You never told me any of this, Theo." "I didn't want to burden you with it," Theo said softly. "I thought I had left it all behind, but now it's back." Ashley's chest tightened. "You think this demon, Donum Diaobli, was the one they summoned?" Theo nodded slowly. "It was the name they kept repeating during the rituals. It means the devil's gift. They said if you ever receive a gift from Donum Diaobli, it means the demon is coming for you. To collect." "To collect what?" Tom's voice was rough, edging on anger now. "What does it want?" Theo's voice dropped, his eyes hollow. "It wants a soul. It marks you with the gift, and then comes and takes what it's owed." The word sent a cold shiver down Ashley's spine. Her mind flashed to the blackened box on the table, the one that Theo had opened last night, unleashing something into their house. Tom slammed his fist on the table, making everyone jump. "This is crazy. We're talking about demons and curses. None of this makes any sense." Ashley reached for his hand, her own trembling slightly. "Tom, I know this sounds insane, but after last night, I believe him." Emily's face twisted in disbelief. "We can't just, accept that there's a demon after us? What are we supposed to do, run?" Theo shook his head. "You can't run from it. Once the gift is received, it's already too late." A heavy silence fell over the room as the gravity of the wood settled in. The fire crackled softly in the room, but its warmth did nothing to dispel the chill that had crept into Ashley's bones. "Is there any way we can stop it?" Ashley asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Theo hesitated. His eyes flickered on the box again. "There's one thing, but it's dangerous. The only way to stop Donum Diaobli is to return the gift. You have to give it back to the demon, but the price is high." "What price?" Emily demanded, her voice shaking in fear. Theo looked at them, his face grim. "Someone has to offer themselves in exchange. A life for a life." Ashley's heart sank. The room seemed to grow darker, the weight of Theo's words pressing down on her like a crushing force. "A life for a life? Who?" Tom asked quietly. "Who offers himself?" Theo's gaze fell on the box again. Then slowly he lifted his eyes to meet theirs, the one who received the gift. Ashley's breath caught in her throat as full of meaning of Theo's word hit her. It was him. He was the marked one. And now, unless they did something, Donum Diaobli would come for all of them. Christmas morning, once bright and joyful, had turned into something far more sinister. The demon had come, and now they were running out of time. The fire flickered, casting long, twisting shadows on the wall. The air in the room seemed to grow heavier, as if a storm was gathering inside the house. The warm, festive glow of Christmas morning dimmed, replaced by an oppressive, suffocating feeling. Ashley could feel it in her bones. Something dark, something malevolent, lurking just beyond the edge of her vision. The Christmas tree lights flickered, casting erratic shadows across the room, and the fire sputtered, as if struggling to stay alive. For a brief moment, everything was still, and the only sound was a faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Theo looked around nervously, his eyes darting towards the box in the center of the table. His hands gripped the edge of the chair so tightly his knuckles were white. "It's starting," he muttered under his breath. Ashley's heart pounded in her chest. "What do you mean?" Before Theo could answer, the lights flickered overhead again, this time more violently, as if someone was tampering with electricity. A cold draft swept through the room, rattling the ornaments on the tree. The stockings hanging on the fireplace swayed, and one of them fell to the floor with a soft thud. Emma, sitting in her high chair, suddenly stopped eating. She sat her spoon down and looked around with wide, curious eyes. "Mommy?" Her voice was soft, but carried the weight that made Ashley's blood run cold. "It's here." Ashley whipped her head around to look at her daughter, fear constricting her chest. "What's here, sweetie?" Emma pointed into the darkened hallway that led to the bedrooms, her small figure trembling slightly. "The thing from last night." The room fell to stunned silence. "What do you mean, Emma?" Tom asked, his voice strained as though he already knew he wouldn't like the answer. Emma's innocent gaze shifted to her father, then back to her mother. "The big monster. It was in my room last night, playing with me." Ashley's breath hitched in her throat, her heart slamming against her ribs. "Playing with you?" Emma nodded, her expression as calm and unaffected as if she were talking about a dream. "It had red eyes and big hands. It tickled me and made my toys float. I thought it was funny." The lights flickered again, this time accompanied by a low, ominous hum that seemed to vibrate through the walls. Ashley's pulse raced as she glanced towards the hallway Emma had pointed to. It was dark, the shadow thick and impenetrable. But she could feel it, the presence. Something was watching from the shadows. Theo stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. No, it's not supposed to happen this fast," he muttered, pacing nervously. Tom's face was pale, his jaw clenched tight. "What the hell is going on, Theo?" Before Theo could respond, a loud bang echoed from the hallway. The door to Emma's room slammed shut on its own, followed by a violent shaking, like something was rattling it from inside. The family jumped, their eyes wide with terror. Then the lights in the living room went out entirely. In the darkness, Ashley felt a cold presence sweep through the room, as if something ancient and malevolent had slithered its way inside. She could hear Emma's soft breathing next to her, but the rest of the house was eerily silent. The fire had gone out, plunging them into total blackness. A faint creaking sound, like floorboards groaning under the weight of something heavy, came from the hallways. Ashley's skin prickled with fear, and then they saw it. At the edge of the room, near the entrance to the hallway, a figure began to materialize, its form hazy and dark, like a smoke gathering into something solid. The air around it shimmered with unnatural energy, and Ashley's breath caught in her throat as the figure took shape. It was tall, inhumanely tall, its gaunt skeletal frame hunched forward as it loomed into the shadows, its eyes glowing a deep, hellish red, fixed on them with intensity that felt like it could burn through their souls. The creature's face was twisted into a grotesque grin, its teeth long and jagged, gleaming faintly in the darkness. Ashley grabbed Tom's arm, her nails digging into his skin. "Do you see it?" Tom nodded, his face pale with shock. "Yeah, I see it." Emily let out a soft whimper, her eyes glued to the figure as it slowly stepped forward, its long, clawed fingers scraping against the wall. The sound was unbearable, a high-pitched screech that made Ashley's stomach twist with nausea. For a moment, the creature stood there, towering over them, its gaze fixed on Theo. The tension in the room was palpable, like the air itself was holding its breath. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the figure began to dissolve. It faded into the shadows, like smoke being blown away by the high wind. The lights flickered back on, casting the room in a harsh, cold brightness that made everything feel surreal. Ashley exhaled a shaky breath, her heart pounding in her ears. Is it gone? But before anyone could answer, a voice, deep, raspy, and inhuman, whispered through the air, chilling them to the bone.
"Time is up."
The voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, wrapping around them like a suffocating shroud. Ashley's eyes shot to Theo, whose face had gone pale as a ghost. His hands trembled as the reality of what was happening sank in. The demon wasn't gone. It was just getting started. That is going to do it for today. I hope that you guys did enjoy. As always, click that like button, hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed it or if you want more content. We make videos 3 times every single week. Every Monday we do an episode of Echoes of the Past where we do a dive into the history of certain haunted locations. Every Wednesday we do an episode of Far From Fiction, which is my true crime series. And then, of course, Friday night, every single week, 9 Eastern, 8 Central, 6 Pacific time, we have a brand new episode of the namesake of the channel, the Friday Night Campfire Stories. Next week, we'll be getting into Chapter 3 of Donum. We may be halfway done with the story already, but as always, I can just promise you, we're just getting started. Thank you guys for watching. Like I said, click that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let me know what you think about the story in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for spending a little bit of your day here with me.